Right, back with you on the Newsfeed PM. Thanks for staying on. The National Lotteries Commission has faced intense public and political backlash after concluding its reparative measures process without providing financial compensation to the whistleblowers who exposed massive corruption within the organization. The controversy centers on what critics call a slap in the face to individuals whose lives and livelihoods were destroyed for revealing a criminal syndicate that allegedly misappropriated up to 2 billion rands in grant funding. Now, let's chat about this, joined by John Clark, an activist and social worker supporting whistleblowers, who is with us in the studio. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on, John.
Thank you, Thabo. Looking forward to the chat.
Talk to us about, firstly, yourself as stakeholders. You're a group of stakeholders. What's your formation? What is your interest in this matter?
Well, my interest is, for the last 5 going on 6 years, I've been providing professional psychosocial support to whistleblowers ever since the Zondo Commission. And we formed a solidarity group from that. For the last 3 years, 2 whistleblowers who had been the sources to Ray Joseph and Groundup were referred to our group and to me personally because they were going through very, very hard times. So over that period, for 3 years, I've been providing mutual support and encouragement. And we were very excited 3 years ago when the Minister Patel started a whole cleanup. And as part of it, he fired the old board, brought in a new board. Jody Skoltz was appointed, and a process was set underway with good faith to try and ensure that the whistleblowers that had suffered such retaliation for what they're doing would be compensated. And there was a clear expectation that this would include financial reparations.
Right.
And over the last year, something changed.
Right.
And just before Christmas,
Wow.
in fact, just around about the time where we had Marius van der Merwe shot and killed, a whistleblower shot and killed for blowing the whistle, the lotteries announced that they had this this process they were going to now offer non-financial compensation. They were talking of it as a healing process, of a learning approach, but were drawing the line against any financial reparations. Now that really angered us all. And I was then, besides the 2 that I was originally involved with, though I remain anonymous, a number of other stakeholders, not necessarily staff, people that had suffered in the NPOs that had been hijacked. We've now formed a solidarity group to join in solidarity to be able to plead with the National Lotteries Commission to have a radical rethink, particularly since Jody Skoltz on your show 2 weeks ago, talking to Hugo, said it was about learning. So I'm going to say, okay, we're going to hold you to that. What are we learning? And I have since now had an engagement with the chair, Barney Pachana, on another program, and it's quite clear that we are talking past each other. And there has to be a sit down where we actually come to terms with the assumptions that were held and to interrogate this presumption that the lotteries cannot provide financial compensation.
we at least for the past 2 years, maybe even more, maybe even 4, others might even say 5 years, the SIU would have been engaged in a process of unveiling the corruption that has been going on at the NLC at this particular point. Asset forfeiture being sent, some assets have been frozen. It's a continuing thing, and then there are other cases that have now been referred to the law. Is that what we are talking about? Are there are individuals who would have exposed that, and how in depth is the work that they've done?
Well, I mean, they are collaborating. They've been helping the SIU with the investigation.
Right.
And one of them called me, we had a chat yesterday, and he said, John, the thieves are flush with money. We have none. They still are looking out and looking to further retaliate against us. It's not just about our livelihoods, it's about our lives. Now, I can understand the Lotteries Commission are going to say, but hang on, isn't that the problem for the state as a whole? And I would have to concede that. But then the question that has to be asked is, why has the state, the government, been in contempt of Judge Zondo, who over 5 years ago, he pleaded for an overhaul of the statutes.
Yeah.
Now, the NLC is a creature of statutes. So they are saying, we've got to stay within the rules, we've got to act lawfully. And what we are saying is that, but, this brings me back to the apartheid days. And the laws are unjust, fundamentally perverse, and discriminate against the very people that are the key to unlocking and solving the corruption problems. So I've been grappling with trying to help understand what has been going on. But I can keep you busy for all afternoon.
But was it expressed explicitly that there'll be monetary compensation at first?
It was certainly the expectation when the first approaches were made. And I do believe that Jody Scholz, in good faith, engaged with them. And after she had heard the terrible suffering they'd gone through. I mean, for example, one of the lotteries guys, the old lotteries board spent, 7 million in litigation against him for blowing the whistle. And he's been one of the leading guys. He's had to, and his life has been effectively ruined. So in the process, I then, as a social worker, working with these two, talked to lawyers and talked to Thuli Madonsela, for example, because there had been a precedent set with the SARS, and she had given us some pointers. So with that expectations, they had to go to further expense to quantify, talking to actuaries and that, what the harm that had been done to them. And so there was a very legitimate expectation. I mean, I got a clinical psychologist to assist me in the assessment process so we could deliver a psychosocial and psychological report. And from that experience, you can see from my subjective experience, from having gone through this, you can see I nearly, had a stroke when I saw that all they were offering was this, like symbolic, pitiful kind of peanuts. Now, I know it's not that. It is going to cost money, and some people might benefit from that, but certainly not the group that's now formed to say we cannot allow this. At the same time, I'm a social worker, and one of my great heroes was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he once told me after I'd written something, he says, "John, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So let your anger subside, find a truly compassionate, loving response to it, test your own assumptions and engage the powers. Don't seek to go into an adversarial route." And that's what I'm really pleading, because the way that the Lotteries Commission have framed it, they said, look, we can't disobey the law.
That's what I wanted to find. The politicians, when sometimes they don't want to do something, they'll say to you, well, we sought legal advice. And at the most opportune moment for them. They don't normally do it in other instances. But in that particular instance where they've got to pay reparations, now they say, no, we sought legal advice. And they'll say, well, within Treasury's laws, there is actually no way we can do that.
Well, one of the things I learned in my activist career going back a long time is that a lawyer's job is to keep you out of trouble. So it's all a question of how you brief your lawyer. What I would have expected Minister Patel, or now the new Minister Parks Tau, and saying, listen, we've got to do this. There is a moral imperative that we meaningfully compensate for them. Yes, we are going to get into trouble with the law, perhaps in terms of the way it's currently framed. But your job as a lawyer is, all the laws are made by lawyers anyway, find a different law that can enable us to do this. That's what I would have expected of our leadership, particularly in this time of crisis. And if I may just draw another parallel for you, Thabo. Over the weekend, I was watching that film called Hidden Figures, which tells the story of how black women were marginalized, taken for granted during the Apollo space program, despite the fact that they were mathematical geniuses and that the whole space program relied on them, but they were discriminated against in their culture that prevailed in NASA at the time. We look back 60 years and we say, how could they be so stupid? Because it is self-defeating to the very institution to deny these people that are... So I draw that parallel. I say, who are the people today that are being marginalized, and it's whistleblowers. And in 60 years' time, I hate to think when our grandchildren are going to look back and they say, for goodness sake, how stupid could you be? You in the deep depths of corruption in this country, and the very people that are supposed to be your saviors are being persecuted, marginalized, and pushed out and offered the sort of peanuts.
Sure.
Now, I don't believe that Barney Pachana, I know him as an old friend, and Ruth and Jody Scholz and all these people are consciously bad people looking to kind of, I won't use a vulgar term, to whistleblowers. Yeah. But they are caught up in what we call in social work learned helplessness, where the institutional culture has got to such a point where even though there is an option, you rather play it safe and batten down and stay with the familiar because you don't want to rock the boat. I'm sorry, South Africa is desperately needing for people to rock the boat because the boat's sinking anyway.
Is there quantification? I mean, I know you say in your article they describe these as groundbreaking, but is there quantification to what the grocery vouchers really amounts to?
Yeah, well, my chosen term for that was earth-shatteringly unjust. But that's just a play on words. And I'm trying to still hearing Archbishop Tutu saying, John, you catch more flies with vinegar, don't be too acerbic. Act in good faith, be hard on the problem, gentle on the people. But the point is, their argument, and this Barney explained to us, or tried to explain to us, very unconvincingly, is that the PFMA doesn't allow this sort of thing. The PFMA does. It talks of payments being made in grace and good favour. There is a limit to how much you can give. It's 100,000 rands. But we say pending an act of Parliament. So the question I ask, well, why didn't you go to Parliament and get them to pass a bill to make sure that the lotteries whistleblowers were actually properly compensated? There's nothing stopping you from doing that. That's what Parliament's there for goodness sake. And all the parties in the government of national unity pay lip service to protecting whistleblowers. Well, here's something they could have done immediately without going into all the deep technicalities of the Protected Disclosures Act, blah, blah, blah. They could have done that. Yeah. Why haven't they done that?
Yes.
Well, I'm saying hope springs eternal. 2026 is going to be the year, a make or break, not just for the National Lotteries Commission, I believe for South Africa, if we are going to go out on a limb to actually start making meaningful changes. Because we've seen with all the commissions, the Mhlanga Commission, everything else, that the whistleblowers are the lifeblood of this country getting back on track. And we cannot have a situation such as, for example, is playing out with the commission about the advocate childcare, where we suddenly see the NDPP absconding from it because suddenly a whistleblower's information comes to the fore and confronts her and makes her now suddenly rethink. I think that's been a watershed moment, and I worked with that whistleblower as well, and we all part of a network. We don't advertise ourselves, we don't say for obvious reasons, and I'm now have to be the face of it because I'm old and, I've done my time.
Somebody might look at that and say exactly that, well, John, we understand what you're saying, we understand your passion about this, and maybe the route that you need to take is to bring, I don't know, is it a citizens' bill before Parliament and pass it through the process so that this can be put into our laws in the country and then it can be done that way.
Let me just cite this. I mean, there was a prominent member of the government of national unity, Songezo Zibi. Before the elections, we met, and he said one of his first priorities is going to be exactly that. Yeah. Now, I've been trying to ask Songezo, and I'm asking him now, what happened, my friend? Why did you suddenly find yourself co-opted into playing a game that's actually leaving the very people that voted for you feeling like, oh, I've been shortchanged. I did vote for you. I'm not going to vote for you again unless I see some meaningful commitment, not just from you, but I'd like to think of the government of national unity should be governance for national unity. I'd like to think of all the parties coming together and say, well, what can unify us? I can't think of a better plank for a unification of our political system than protecting and supporting whistleblowers.
Yeah.
The only question that's left is, why isn't that happening? Because it'd be bad for business for the thugocrats who are actually, I think, behind the scenes trying to retard any progress, because they know it's bad for business if whistleblowers are protected and supported, because they would be put out of business. Corruption won't pay anymore. Honesty, integrity, all these values that our founding father, Nelson Mandela, tried to instill in us. That's what is going to make us a great nation. Yeah. And so anyway, I'm sorry if I'm letting off steam now. I do so with a spirit of goodwill. I hope that we can rapidly find each other, Barney and Jody and myself, and we want to all get together, all stakeholders, the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, this group that I facilitate. Jack, I have to also pay tribute to Toby Chance from the DA. He's been very helpful to us. He needs to get credit for that. The journalists that have actually helped expose this. I mean, how perverse is this? And I'm saying this, I know Ray is a humble guy, doesn't like to make the story about him. They wouldn't even give him an apology for what the previous lottery board had done in their smear campaign against him. All he asked for, he said, I don't want any financial compensation, I just want an apology. They gave him a letter of appreciation, but they wouldn't give him an apology. Why? Because the lawyer said, whoops, you open yourself up for liability and you're going to get sued. Lawyers we can't have this country run by lawyers. We need to have this country run by people of integrity. And what we are now simply, at the same time, the implications, the Lotteries Commission said, okay, guys, if you're not happy with it, take us to court. I mean, it's such an insensitive thought. I mean, you know what whistleblowers go through.
Right.
They don't have resources to do this. So I just say that because if there are pro bono law firms that want to come on board, we do need lawyers, but they must be prepared to take a brief from us, not simply to kind of paddle their own canoe,
John,
to float their own boat.
I hope they heard you, and maybe I hope it was fundamentally not misconstrued. They understood your passion, but thank you very much for coming and for raising that. That's a social worker, but also an activist, John Clark, representing an anonymous group of National Lotteries whistleblowers and other stakeholders within this reparations process, and calling for real terms, monetary reparations.